Alright, what is going on, everybody? We are back with another tier list video. Doing some Overwatch 2 now with all the new heroes and new reworks and abilities and everything. So, let us get to it. So, we're going to start off with Bastion. I'm just going to put him in B, only because he has been out of the game pretty much since launch. So, it's kind of hard to put him anywhere because he is literally just taken out of the game. I'm also going to put Torb in B because he has been out of the game for about half the time and only in certain game modes and queues and everything. So it's hard to place those two based on what I've seen, in Overwatch 2. So we will go with the rest. Brigitte still is arguably the worst character in Overwatch, in my opinion. She's just kind of bad at everything. Not gonna do a whole lot of damage. Not gonna really help off tank wise. Not gonna heal you very much. Just needs hella buffs, in my opinion. The new Erisa, I'm going to put an A, and the only reason why I'm not going to put her in S is because I do feel like her shield was much better than her current abilities. Now, they are super helpful, and I do think she's very, very strong and can dish out a lot of damage as well as keep herself alive with the abilities that she does have. But it's also hard because she has no... not enough survivability, I would say, to put into the S tier. So we're going to keep her at A. Hanzo, I'm going to put in B. I think that him and Widow are two viable heroes at times, but I don't think that they're necessarily the best DPS and the most helpful in most situations. If I had to pick one, I would probably choose Hanzo over Widow just because his ult is much better and I think he can dish out a lot more damage than Widow. But they're both can be solid picks at certain times. Hammond, I'll also go B. I think he's just one of those annoying nuisance tanks. But as far as survivability and everything, I don't think that he is as good as he once was. Being solo tanks in most game modes now, as well as just not really doing enough. I think he was definitely one of the better tanks, unfortunately, when there was two, but now that there is one, he is not. But he can still, cause problems circling around the payload or something, or on a point or whatever, and he's not the worst, but definitely not better than B in my opinion. Doomfist, I'm going to put in C. Honestly, I really haven't even seen that much Doomfist gameplay, whether it's on my team or against. He's just kind of not really in the meta at all. But I do think that the new reworked Doomfist has some viability a little bit. If I had to choose between B and D, I'd probably go more towards the D aspect as far as where he should be more placed, definitely like C- area, I would say. But he does have some kill ability for sure, being able to, almost like a Roadhog hook and pick with low health units, much like his, fist smash into a wall. But that's about as good as he kind of gets, in my opinion, as far as where he should be placed. Oh, let's see. Mei, I'm going to put in B also. I feel like she's just the most mid unit ever. She's never really that good. She's never really like that bad, but just never really gives you that oomph for a team at all. So yeah, we're going to put her in B. Tracer, I think a lot of people are going to go B. I think Tracer has some peel potential, but as far as actual damage output, she's just not going to be there in contention with like Ashe or Sojourn or Soldier, or even, McCree or others she's just not going to do more damage than them. Now, as far as picking wise, then yes, possibly, but not really. Symmetra, I'm also going to put in C. Not really viable in 90% of, you know, metas or game modes or teams, but she does have some viability with her sentries and, you know, can help with a little bit of damage output, but she's definitely like a utility DPS, so you gotta watch out for that. Sombra, I'm gonna also put in B. We're just gonna have a shit ton of people in B, because she's just, again, a very much utility DPS unit. She's not gonna have the most damage, but the other things that she do can definitely change some team fights or the entire game in itself. Moira, I'm going to put an S. I think she is the best healer in the game, or at least has the potential to be. I definitely think she's pretty strong, if not overpowered. Can definitely dish out a shit ton of healing and do a shit ton of damage as well, because they also obviously go hand in hand. But I will give her the nod to S. Definitely minimum like A+ tier for sure, but I'll go ahead and give her the nod to S just because her healing and damage output is unlike any other support character in the game. Lucio, I'm going to give to A. The only reason why I'm not going to give to S is because I don't think he can necessarily out-heal anyone, as in a one-on-one healing ability. As well as he's not going to do that much damage either as a support character, but he is super viable, being able to, you know, heal essentially the entire team at once, and his ult is definitely game-changing. He's definitely a good support character and very easy to play, but I just can't give him the nod to S because of those aspects. Mercy. Oh, Mercy is my baby. I think I got to give her the S too. The biggest reason being is her res ability, even though it's not as good as it was in the original Overwatch in the very beginning. Being able to pick someone up during fights is huge. I think her single healing potential is the best in the game. Moira can just out-heal her, it feels like. And then Moira is also much more viable as far as the damage than Mercy. But the damage boost from Mercy also can, you know, change some fights as well. And her Valkyrie being able to heal multiple units as well. And her ult is very huge. And the helpfulness of the damage boost can really change some fights. Plus just being able to res. I do think she needs a little bit of changing or buffs. She might be like A+, mid-A tier, but for me she's definitely like, if you need a straight just heal unit, she's the best, in my opinion. Pharah and Echo, I'm both going to put in B. I think they have very good damage potential, but they are very easily targeted because of how many hit scan units there are now, especially with Sojourn coming in, and the fact that there is one less tank, so there are, you know, less units to look at, and if one of them's in the sky, they can definitely be easily targeted. But as far as actual damage that either of them can do and viability, I would give the nod to Pharah over Echo, but I do think again that they can be shut down a little bit, and I still don't think, depending on, a lot of their role depends on what the other team is running. If they have no hit scans, then you're going to excel, and if they do, it just kind of depends on if they're targeting you or if you're killing them or doing enough damage to them to where they're not really doing enough to you. But I do think they are still viable, but just probably not as like the #1 DPS unit on your team. Same with Genji. I think he's just a nuisance to play against. But I do feel like in Overwatch 2, he's kind of being shut down pretty easily. He's not as viable as he once was. Again, I think a lot of these heroes are changed because of having one less unit on the field. Well, I guess technically two, one on each side. So he's much easier to deal with and get targeted and kill him as well as get killed. And I also don't think that his damage is going to outweigh be a number 1 DPS unit on your team. Junker Queen. Junker Queen I'm going to give to A. I almost put her in S, but the reason why I'm going to stick with A is because if you're not doing the right abilities and hitting them, then she's not going to be able to continuously heal herself and stay alive and do well. I do think she's very, very strong, very solid. She can definitely keep herself alive so long as you're hitting these abilities, and she can do a pretty good amount of damage. But if you're not hitting these abilities, then it is hard to keep yourself alive, and it's then up to your support teammates to do that. Plus she has the least amount of health out of all tanks, I believe, which I understand due to the healing, but she's definitely very, very strong. Very good abilities, very close range. She's basically the female Roadhog, if you will. And her ult is very, very helpful. It's essentially just an Ana grenade, but can hit just as many people and everything like that. So it's very nice, and it does heal her too, I believe. So very, very solid tank choice. If she is the solo tank, which most of the time that's all the game modes, but if they are, she's not necessarily the best option depending on what maps and game modes, but she can still be very, very viable. Junkrat, I gotta put in C. I just don't think he is remotely in any meta anymore, which is unfortunate, but I think that is solely based on the fact that there are so many less shields in the game. Erisa doesn't have her shield anymore. Reinhardt's shield is much less health, and there's no double tank to have double shields with that or anybody else like Sigma, so his killing ability is still there, but it is just not as solid as it once was. He's definitely just spam the balls and get some high damage output, maybe a pick or two, and then try to ult and kill as many people as you can, but it is what it is. Diva right now I feel like is very, very strong. I actually might go ahead and put her into S right now. I feel like she has been very hard to deal with, and her defense matrix is very, very great. Always has been a very strong ability in the entire game. And technically having quote-unquote 2 lives, being inside a mech and outside a mech keeps her viability even more. And her ult can definitely change the tide if you get some picks with it. So unlimited ammo, pretty good amount of damage output because of that, and her rockets, and can keep herself alive a little bit with the defense matrix, and 2 lives, so very, very nothing bad to say about Diva, really. Soldier I also have to put into S. I mean, he's just arguably the most solid DPS in the game, at least as far as consistency. Being able to heal himself with his healing field, his rockets do high amount of damage, and just being hit scan, very easy to get a high amount of damage output and keep himself alive. So super, super solid DPS choice always. If you just need one, he's definitely going to be chosen or be a top choice for anybody. Reaper I have to put in B. I think he is just a little too inconsistent. He has some ups and downs depending on maps and game mode and team comps, but he's still viable in most ways. It's just not as much, in my opinion. I'm a Reaper boy. Zenyatta I'm also going to put into B. I just don't think his healing is enough anymore. He's definitely helpful as far as the DPS aspect as a support character. So if you have a Mercy and Moira and your DPS is a little bit, your DPS teammates are a little bit questionable, you know, Zen is a good choice because he can dish out the DPS while also giving pretty good heals. But there's, you know, even some other healers that do enough healing as him from what I've seen so far. Winston is difficult. I feel like he used to be a lot easier to deal with, and you would think being only one tank that he wouldn't be, but he is a little bit harder to deal with, I think, because he's actually doing a little bit more damage with his new ability now. But I just don't think that I can put him in A, not yet. I think there's other people that have more sustainability and healing than him as far as being able to help the team and do enough damage. I think he's probably one of the least overall damaging tanks in the game, but being able to shield and jump away can definitely help a certain dive comp or certain maps or game modes for sure. Zarya, you know, she's my baby, my favorite tank, but I just don't think she is as viable as she used to be. I think not having that other tank to bubble has really hurt her sustainability. Her ult is obviously still one of the best in the game and game changer, but I mean, her being able to bubble herself is definitely great, and being able to do that twice definitely has some sustain, so maybe we can put her in A for sure. But it's just a lot harder. I feel like she doesn't have enough energy all the time because she's not able to bubble anyone else and she's being targeted, which, you know, she can bubble herself now twice back to back. But it's still a little bit difficult to put her up. I feel like she's not as good as she once was, and maybe that's because she's still so close range all the time. But she's still strong, just not as good. Reinhardt, I'm going to put in B. He's definitely fallen down being the solo tank, and his main thing being a shield that has 800 less health, I believe, is not that viable. The second fire strike is super helpful and nice. Definitely can do a whole lot more damage and help your team in that aspect, and definitely help him get his ult faster. But again, being essentially one of the faces of Overwatch because of the shield, and now that that's so much worse, and him being the solo tank in most fights, that it's just definitely not as viable anymore and not as good. Ooh, let's see. Baptiste, I gotta put B. I think his ult is very, very lackluster. Very hard to consistently use and have people do enough damage or healing through it or with it. I do think he is a pretty solid healer. I would say one of the better ones, but not... I just feel like there's better choices overall. Now, as far as DPS, again, with a support character, he can definitely be up there, as well as keep himself and his team alive with being able to actively heal himself and the immortality field for whoever is in it. Very strong choice, but just overall better healing choices or support choices. But again, I think he's definitely a budget DPS possibly, and just a budget healer. I don't think he's like #1 support character on the team. Anna, I would probably put an S. I feel like she has just continuously grown more and more and more strong, and definitely having so much healing being done to one tank being able to stop that for an entire team or anybody else is super good. She can take care of herself as far as DPS or healing and sleep darting, and the healing is just overall good. The only thing I would say, if you're only running her with support, or you don't have another decent enough support, like it's her and Zen, or her and Brig, or somebody, it's a little bit harder to solo, but she can definitely do it. But I would probably say in this order of healers is where I would put them, as far as overall usefulness. Now the rest are difficult. I'm going to put McCree in B. I think he is still viable, but he's just not as close range strong as he once was without his stun. I haven't seen too much of his flash grenade or anything like that, but I still think he's a solid DPS choice and can definitely deal out some damage, but I think he's also a lot more easily stopped by a lot of people because he doesn't have his stun. He can't, you know, stop a Tracer or a Reaper getting in his face or anything as well as he used to be able to do. So that's why I would have to put him in B. I want to put Sigma in A, mostly because of his ability to gain shield from taking it, from, you know, damage being shot at or dealt towards him. The shield does help, and he has a whole lot of health and can gain more personal shield. And he can do some solid damage, and his ult is good, but he's not... Again, he was definitely one of the better tanks when there was, you know, double shield meta. You know, like him and Rein or him and Erisa or whatever. Very, very solid, but he's a little less useful being the solo tank now. Still a solid choice, but, you know, be careful of what map game mode and team comp you're kind of running for him. Ashe, I'm going to put an A. I think she can definitely keep herself alive in one-on-one fights, as well as her ult with Bob is still very, very strong, and she can definitely pick off some units. You know, she's definitely a budget sniper, but honestly better than, you know, Hanzo or Widow, in my opinion, as far as damage output. And then her dynamite is definitely super strong as well, especially if it hits you. But yeah, I would put her very high on the DPS list. Definitely very useful, and it's nice that you can switch back and forth kind of between sniping or close range just shots. And yeah, she could definitely be #1 damage output. Sojourn, I think I'm gonna have to put her into S, honestly. I think she can dish out so much damage just from her rifle, which is like soldiers almost, but then being able to left trigger and hit for much, much more is very solid. Her orb ability can definitely be useful and do some interesting amount of damage that isn't typical, an area effect. So that's nice that she has something like that. And then I think the biggest reason why she would be an S is her movement, her ability to slide in any direction, but also if you jump after or during that time, you're going super high. So she's very, very mobile, hard to hit, does a whole lot of damage, can keep herself alive that way as well, obviously, so that's super useful. And then her ult is just fully charged shots, which is very, very strong as long as you're obviously hitting them, but can definitely mow down an enemy team pretty decently. So I think she definitely has very, very high DPS viability for sure. I would argue probably better than Soldier, but the only reason why you might argue against that too is just because Soldier can heal himself. But and he can, you know, sprint, but still. And Roadhog. I'm going to have to give Roadhog the S, honestly. I think the amount of health that he has, plus being able to heal so much of that and keep himself alive and slowly, you know, get some picks is super huge. I think he's definitely one of the better tanks in the game of choice. And obviously doing damage to him and just either the healers healing him gives them their ult, or he's just healing himself, which is also giving him his ult, is just, you know, all good things coming his way, for sure. And he can definitely, he's probably not going to do that much damage, but the damage that he does, you know, were mostly from, you know, picks and hooks. So it was most of the time good damage. And then last but not least, Kiriko, I'm going to put an A. I think the amount of healing that she can do is super, super high. I think she can definitely do some DPS if you're focused on that. I think the time between healing and being able to throw your kunai or throwing knives, whichever you'd like to call them, can be faster. It kind of slows you down a little bit going back and forth. But I think being able to essentially never reload your heal, so almost mercy heal your team, do some decent damage, and her ult is super strong for the entire team in that area. So much more speed to your attacks and movement speed. It's a very, very strong ult. Now her nimble step or whatever it is, while good, it's not always the most useful and can definitely feel like you teleported but then did not. I had so many deaths that I've clicked it and then I'm dead, but my cooldown is on, so it's a little frustrating in that aspect. Now her other ability where she gets rid of teammate effects, that can definitely be very useful. It is just a very specific ability. You know, if the other team doesn't have an Ana or a Sombra or something that, you know, affects your team in that way, then that ability is a lot less useful to everybody. And there's only so many abilities that can get rid of negative effects like that, or even like a Widow Mine maybe. But it's definitely a very lackluster ability. But I do feel scared that if it would be buffed or changed, that she would become much, much more stronger. But yeah, this is where I would place most people. Obviously, Overwatch 2 has not been out that long, and people are still being changed. Some people are still not even back in the game, or even in you know, certain game modes. But this is where I would place overall most people for Overwatch 2 in its current state. So we will catch you guys with a different tier list at another time.